So we finally have the full spoilers for chapter 22 of Boruto Two Blue Vortex, and let's just say that it's not looking good for Boruto. Jura just countered his strongest jutsu known as Uzuhiko like it was nothing. So we have a lot to discuss, but of course we're gonna start from the top. So the person on the cover is Boruto himself, and you guys can picture that in your mind because we won't be getting the panels themselves, just the text leaks. The title of the chapter is also Jura, which makes sense when you realize that the entire chapter is just Boruto versus Jura. Now note that it says that the first official spoiler that was released a few days ago, which showed Jura arriving on the battlefield next to Mitsuki and Sarada using a cloud is like the third page of the chapter. And this is important because everything that's released in this spoiler drop is referring to things that happened after he's already on the battlefield. So we have no idea what happened on the first two pages, so keep that in mind. Now it then says that Jura doesn't seem to care about Mitsuki and Araya, but I think he looks at Sarada for a brief moment with a ... which shows that he's pondering something before looking away. It then says that he's searching for Boruto or looking towards his direction. It also then says that Jura doesn't seem to care about Ryu's Thorn Soul because of course he was destroyed by Sarada and turned into a Thorn Soul similar to what happened to Hidari. And this is important because of course in chapter 13 Jura said that the reason why he had to retreat is because the Thorn Soul bulb for Hidari was going to rot and he had to revive him quickly. So maybe he doesn't care about Ryu, or he just believes that he can take care of Boruto quickly enough without causing any problems. Although, if that is the case, he could have also done that in chapter 13. But I guess we'll see. Now it says back to Boruto and Mr. Konohamaru. And he's also being pretty direct here. It says Matsuri's remains turns into a Thorn Soul. Konohamaru will have the Thorn Soul. Then it says Jura knows where Boruto is and flies towards him at top speed. And I do find this somewhat interesting because it implies that Matsuri turned into a Thorn Soul by simply being cut into multiple pieces with her head being mostly intact to some extent, while Hidari was totally fine with like 90% of his body destroyed. So maybe Boruto finished her off using a ki blast of sorts similar to what Trunks did to Frieza, which is what this moment was imitating here. Or maybe what he did was simply enough for Matsuri to just turn into a Thorn Soul. I guess we'll see. It then says or implies that Boruto is preemptively throwing shurikens around the rock formations so that he can use, Flying Thunder God when Jura tries to attack him. Which implies that he knows that Jura is on the battlefield and he knows that he's coming. Which, he should know since Kashin Kochi told him that he would come. But yeah, Jura throws a Renegon Jubi Dama, which is referring to the Biju Bomb, to where Boruto and Konohamaru are. Boruto then grabs Konohamaru to get away from the explosion and then throws him away, which I think just means he dropped him off at a different location. Then says that Konohamaru is leaving, running away with Matsuri's Thorn Soul. So it doesn't seem like Jura is going to get that one. He might get Ryu's. So I guess we might see what happens when someone is revived using a Thorn Soul, which then leaves what happens when a Shinju consumes their target, and hopefully that happens as well. Now then says suddenly Mr. Boruto appears behind Jura and lands a Rasengan on his back. So Boruto lands a direct hit onto Jura using his Rasengan. At least that is what is claimed here. It then says that the Rasengan is pushing Jura down, but he managed to turn himself and fires a Renegon Biju Bomb at Boruto. Boruto then uses FTG to get away. And by the way, this is really important to keep in mind. And unless you think Jura is holding back to some extent for some reason, and maybe he is, that might be the case, because he did hold back against Himawari even after becoming like 10% serious. So if this Biju Bomb is the same laser Biju Bomb that Jura used to blitz Himawari, and Boruto is dodging it at point blank range because he did this while connecting his Rasengan, this means that Boruto is faster than Himawari. For the people that think Himawari is faster and stronger than Boruto for some reason, because those people do exist by the way. And I know that Boruto did this using FTG, but it's still a greater feat than Himawari because she got perception blitz by the attack itself. She didn't even know what hit her. And Boruto is here perceiving the ability and reacting to it using hand signs to activate Flying Thunder God. So it's pretty obvious, okay? Now he also notes that there's no blood on Jura after he tanked the Rasengan because, again, Boruto hit him in the back with it and it did 0 damage. So Jura is a tank, he's crazy strong. At least in comparison to Hidari that got absolutely vaporized by this very normal Rasengan even before Uzuhiko. Now then says that Jura keeps falling looking up, which I think he meant to say that Jura keeps falling while looking up. I'm not sure how he got to the point of looking up because they didn't explain it in the spoiler. But it then says that Boruto teleports behind him with FTG from a rock formation which has a shuriken. And this is of course the second sneak peek, which I didn't cover in a video yesterday because of course it's just Boruto swiping at Jura and Jura blocking it with a single finger. So there's not much to discuss and make a video on, you know, but it just shows that Jura is pretty strong because he's blocking the attack with a single finger from Boruto, which reminds me of when Aizen did the same thing to Ichigo, you know, good times, good times. He then says that Jura says something, I think it's about Flying Thunder God, and then it says back to Ada and Kashin Koji. They talk and this Boruto don't have a chance of winning, which I think he's just saying that they're talking about how Boruto doesn't have a chance of winning, and then says they're talking about the FTG symbols as well, which might be interesting because I'm not sure why they would be talking about that. Maybe there's some kind of limitation that we aren't aware of, so I guess we'll see. He then says, I think Jura says Boruto knows too much about them and the Thorn Soul and stuff, so he has to kill him. He also wants to know the source of his information, which of course is Kashin Koji. Then we get to the interesting part, which says Boruto thinks he can only win using Uzuhiko because of course Jura just tanked a Rasengan to his back with 0 damage. He then says that Jura questions Boruto about what is love, says that love brought him there and is a human defect. And I mentioned this in the prior video as well, that Jura was testing Boruto. He wanted to see if he would succumb to the very same thing that every character has so far, even the Shinju themselves. And I do wonder if he separates Boruto from humans because Boruto is 100% Otsutsuki and even refers to him as Boruto Otsutsuki. So I kind of went into that in the prior one, I'm not going to go into it again. You guys can go watch that video, but it's kind of interesting. Now then says that he uses Mokutan on Boruto, which I believe is referring to wood release. Boruto then jumps away and cuts them apart. Jura then starts to spam the ability and Boruto runs away until one of them hits him. Then says that Boruto is separated from his katana. He then says that Jura was able to capture Boruto using Mokutan, so he can't move. And he and Boruto, you know, have a conversation, and I think that part will be really good. I'm looking forward to that one. Then says that Jura grabs Boruto's katana, and when I saw this in the spoiler, the first thing that came to mind was when Madara grabbed Sasuke's katana and held him using Limbo and then proceeded to kill him using his own sword. And I thought that was going to happen here as well, but nonetheless Boruto survives somehow. He then says, and this might be a huge oversight by Jura, maybe he doesn't care by the way, but he then says that suddenly Uzuhiko aura starts to surround Boruto. This of course makes sense because he's been held in a stationary position which allows him to absorb more of the planetary energy, and that reminds me of when Naruto was fighting Pain and Pain held him using one of the other paths and Naruto used that as an opportunity to absorb more natural energy to enter Sage Mode once again. So they're kind of playing off these two scenes with Naruto and Sasuke, which is pretty cool. He then says that the wood release that was keeping him from moving gets destroyed. Boruto then teleports to where his katana is and lands an Uzuhiko onto Jura, and this makes sense because Jura has Boruto's katana in his hand. Though it is important to note that it doesn't seem like Boruto had a lot of time to charge Uzuhiko because it looks kinda weak, so it looks similar to when he did it versus Code as opposed to when he did it to Hidari. He then says that Uzuhiko pushes Jura back and the effects are starting to affect him, so he falls to his knees. And the effects it's referring to of course is the vertigo caused by the ability, which pretty much causes the person to feel dizzy and makes it seem like everything around them is rotating or spinning. Though surprisingly or unsurprisingly to be honest, it then says that Jura was able to nullify Uzuhiko using the same principle of how the Tail Beast Bomb works, ? And this is really important because I don't know why they would mention this if it wasn't hinted at in the chapter itself, so maybe there's a mechanical reason to where how the Tail Beast Bomb is created, that they can then use that mechanic to disable or nullify Boruto's Uzuhiko. And there is a technical aspect to the BG Bomb itself, which is the balance of the 8:2 ratio of the negative chakra and positive chakra. Though I'm not sure how that translates to negating Uzuhiko, I do see the rotational aspect of how it's created. That might give some credence to it because of course this is the rotational energy that the planet generates by of course rotating. So there is a connection there, at least in terminology. I did notice that not every BG Bomb has that rotational aspect to it, because when you look at when Naruto did it in his foretelled state, he drew the power towards him in a straight line. It wasn't rotating, similar to when Himawari did it versus Jura. Then you have Jura himself, when he does it, it also pulls towards him in a straight line, it doesn't rotate. The same thing with 8 Tails, when he did it, it did rotate, but with the 9 Tails when he did it versus Naruto, it didn't rotate. So there seems to be some mechanical difference with how the BG Bomb is used sometimes, and hopefully they go in depth on how that connects to the rotational energy of the planet. I think that would be pretty interesting. I mean, the Tentacles does absorb that same energy, so it kind of makes sense that they're connected. With that said, it then said that Jura stands up fine while Boruto has this worried look on his face and says Uzuhiko didn't work. And that's the end of the chapter. The text then says even the trump card that could turn the tide is invalidated. A future of despair is closing in on Mr. Boruto. So yeah, that is it for the spoilers, guys. If you guys have any thoughts on it, let me know down below. And also, if you guys want to become a member, I would consider doing it. If I do get the actual, raw leaks, I'll post them on the membership side because, of course, I can't post them in the actual videos. So yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.